everyone, it's Justine, and I'm going to be making some bulk thank you cards using some pretty basic supplies that most card makers have in their household already. Now for these cards, they are bulk cards, however they're all different as you can see. So feel free and follow along and see which one you like the best and make a bunch of bulk cards using that, or you can learn how to make all your cards a little bit different to make a really awesome variety pack for a friend. I'm using the MISTI Creative Corners, and I'll show you exactly how they work in just a second. So I need to put my cardstock in the middle of my MISTI because I'm using this big background stamp from Simon Says Stamp that's kind of like a mandala, but if I were to put my cardstock in the corner like I normally do with a MISTI, it really wouldn't work. So I add these two corners to make sure my cardstock is going to be in the exact same spot every time. And then I simply need to remove whatever pieces of the creative corners are in the way of the stamp, which would be that L shape. Now, if my cardstock moves out of place, I am able to simply add that L back in and realign my cardstock where it was. As you can see, because of the size of the stamp, I'm unable to secure my cardstock with a magnet, so these creative corners are super awesome. Now for the first two cards, I'm stamping in khaki ink from Simon Says Stamp. And I am going to be using the creative corners on all of these cards. However, I'm using a different variety of cardstock. So I'm using 4 Gina K craft cardstock and 1 white, just to show you a little bit of contrast on how you can create, again, the same card, but different. I just got Gina K paper in yesterday, and I am loving it. It's so awesome. I've never tried it before, and it's got such a great weight. It's so smooth. It's absolutely amazing, so I'm really excited to be using it in this card tutorial. So again, some craft cardstock, some white cardstock, and feel free to use any background that you have in your craft stash for this card. The next 3 I'm going to be stamping on craft card bases, and I'm stamping in Versamark and adding embossing powder each time. I'm going to use 3 different types of embossing powder. As you can see, it didn't stamp properly the first time, so I was able to add back in my corners and re-stamp it on those places where I needed it. Then I was able to cover it in embossing powder. I'm going to use copper embossing powder, white, as well as clear. Again, if you only have one type of embossing powder, you could just use one. And of course, if you don't own embossing powder or a heat gun, just stamp them in regular ink. There's so many varieties to these cards that you can do, and I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with after watching this video. Just keep in mind, when doing bulk cards, we are not creating each card individually at a time. That would take forever. Bulk cards means having an efficient production line. So cut all your cardstock first, whether you need to make 5 or 100 cards, then do all your stamping next, then put all of your embossing powder on next, and then heat all of your embossing all at once. It's going to save you a lot of time. So again, I used copper, clear, and white embossing powders to make a wide variety onto my cards. And for the first 2, I used just regular stamping with craft ink, or khaki ink rather. So now I'm just going to heat up all of those embossed backgrounds, and I'm putting you in warp speed because nobody wants to watch me just sit here and emboss. You'll know your embossing is ready when your embossing powder melts. It turns into a shiny and glossy appearance instead of a dull powdery appearance. After cutting out these rectangles for my cards, I ended up with a strip that was left over, and I don't like to waste things, so I'm going to use that strip to add some sentiments onto. And I'm going to have "You Have a Heart of Gold" and "Just for Being You," and I'm going to stamp them in black ink. And the reason being is because I'm going to add this underneath a die cut that says thanks. This is from the My Favorite Things Kind Things stamp, and it's one of my current favorites, but I'm sure a lot of you have a thank you stamp in your arsenal. Alright, so once I'm finished cutting those down, I'm going to grab a thanks die from My Favorite Things, and I'm going to cut out 2 in white and 3 in ivory cardstock. Once I'm finished with that, which I did off screen, I apologize, I'm going to cut some fishtail ends onto my sentiments. Now how I do that is I grab my sentiment, and I have my little card panel here, and I'm going to measure in the middle, or I'm going to look in the middle, and I'm going to make a dot with my pencil. And I'm going to cut from the very corner to that dot. Now the dot needs to be centered, so you can use a ruler if you're not very good at that, but I just tend to do it freehand, and it turns out good, I would say about 95% of the time. Now and again I get a wonky one. So some of these I'm going to cut a fishtail at both ends, some of them I'm going to cut them at one end, and some of them I'm just going to leave them as they are. I like having a variety, and I think it looks really great. So then all I need to do is adhere everything onto my card panels. So I have those thanks die cuts already, which I did off screen, and then I have these all finished and cut out the way that I wanted to have them, and I'm just going to add some 3D foam tape onto the back of these. I'm using 3D foam tape from 3M, which is my favorite because it's really easy to cut down into smaller sizes, as well as cut them with a non-stick scissors is absolutely no big deal. With other ones, I find them super sticky and really difficult to do. Okay, so once I have a 3D panel onto those, cut all out, it's just a time to attach everything to those card bases that I made, or those card panels rather. So I'm going to make a variety of them. So again, I have the thank you cut out in white as well as ivory. So I'm cutting out an ivory for this one, and I'm going to do an ivory for the copper one. And the only ones I'm doing white are the ones that involved white. So I'm using ivory on the copper as well as the clear embossing powder, and I am only using the white when I used white embossing powder and when I used white cardstock, and that's because ivory would clash totally with those. So again, it's up to you whether you even want to do this step in your bulk cards. Okay, so now it's just simply time to attach these to some card bases. I'm going to fold over 3 ivory card bases using Gina K cardstock and 2 white card bases. And I am going to just lay them all into a pile here and just attach the panels onto the back. I'm going to add you into super warp speed now again, just because there's no sense in watching me do this over and over again in normal speed. So there you go, you have 5 really unique thank you cards. However, they're all the same in a certain way. I just used different techniques and different supplies I had in my tools in order to create these. So take a look at what you have in your stash and take a look at what you can do to manipulate your bulk cards in different ways. So I'm going to just go through them and show you them now. One was with craft ink, one was with clear embossing powder, copper embossing powder, white embossing powder, and again the white one was with craft ink. So I absolutely love the way that they turned out, and I'm super happy that I have this really cool bulk cards to give to a friend. Thank you so much for watching my video, everyone. If you're interested in any of the supplies used, they're listed below in the video description or on my blog. You can access my blog here, subscribe to my channel, or check out a couple of other videos that I've connected to that you might enjoy if you watched this one. Thanks so much for watching!